Hi everyone, here we are again for Ways of the World, a brief global history with sources. As we continue our study of political transformations, empires, and encounters, we're going to finish up with Asian empires. Alright, so let's start with making China an empire. The Qing dynasty, which is 1644 to 1912, launched enormous imperial expansion to the north and west. The nomads of the north and west were familiar to the Chinese. There's an 80-year-long Chinese conquest, 1680 to 1760, and it was motivated by security fears as a reaction to the Dzungar state. Now, China evolved into a Central Asian empire, a conquered territory that was ruled separately from the rest of China through the court of colonial affairs. There's considerable use of local elites to govern. The officials often imitated Chinese ways, but government did not try to assimilate those conquered peoples. And there was little Chinese settlement in the conquered regions. But there is a large territorial expansion that added small non-Chinese minorities. And the Russian and Chinese rule really impoverished Central Asia and turned it into a backward region. All right, Qing conquest in Central Asia. This is painted by a Chinese artist in the mid-18th century, and this image portrays Ma Cheng, a leading warrior involved in the westward extension of the Qing Empire. Now, the painting was commissioned by the emperor himself and served to honor the bravery of Ma Cheng. So in what way does this painting suggest that Qing strategies with the nomads on China's frontier was a departure from that of previous dynasties? Well, prior to the Qing, Chinese dynasties dealt with pastoral nomads reactively. Through diplomacy or defensive measures like the Great Wall, for example, they attempted to forestall invasion. The Qing, a nomadic dynasty of Manchus itself, proactively and expanded to conquer those pastoral nomads. This is evident in this image of a Qing warrior, which shows him galloping aggressively into battle with Chinese dress, most notably the peacock feather in his headgear. All right, so let's look at China's Qing dynasty empire. After many centuries of intermittent expansion into Central Asia, the Qing dynasty brought this vast region firmly under its control. So compare the pattern of Qing expansion with that of Russia. What were the similarities and differences in how the two empires interacted with conquered people? Well, both expansions took place at about the same time, and their initial motivations for expansion, the pacification of neighboring pastoral peoples, were similar. However, Russia's expansion increased its proportional size substantially more than did China's expansion. And Russia expanded mostly east and south, while China expanded north and west. The Chinese generally did not seek to assimilate local people in a Chinese culture and showed considerable respect for regional cultures, and conquered areas were not flooded with Chinese settlers. In Russia, however, the influx of Russian settlers alongside the efforts to Christianize conquered peoples and to force them to abandon their nomadic ways led to a Russification, quote unquote, of these regions. Moreover, while conquered regions in China were ruled separately through the court of colonial affairs, there's no indication of similar decentralized rule of the newly acquired territories in Russia. All right, Muslims and Hindus in the Mughal Empire. So the Mughals united much of India between 1526 and 1707. Mughal Empire's most important divide was religious. Emperor Akbar, who ruled 1556 to 1605, attempted serious accommodation of the Hindu majority. For example, he brought many Hindus into the political military elite, supported the creation of Hindu buildings. He lessened Hindu restrictions on women and imposed a policy of toleration. He abolished the payment of the jizya tax by non-Muslims and created a state cult that stressed loyalty to the emperor. And Akbar and his successors encouraged a hybrid Indian, Persian, Turkic culture. And the Mughal toleration provoked a reaction among some Muslims. The Emperor Aurangzeb, who ruled from 1658 to 1707, reversed that Mughal policy and tried to reimpose Islamic supremacy. And Aurangzeb banned sati, or widow burning, music and dance at court, and other various vices. He also commissioned the destruction of some Hindu temples and reimposed the jizya tax. And Aurangzeb's policies provoked a Hindu reaction. So here we are with a map of the Mughal Empire. Now, the overall style of the Mughal Empire was that of a blended elite culture in which both Hindus and various Muslim groups could feel comfortable. Persian artists and writers were welcomed into the empire, and the Hindu epic Ramayana was translated into Persian, while various Persian classics appeared in Hindi and Sanskrit. As I mentioned earlier, Akbar and his immediate successors downplayed a distinct Islamic identity for the Mughal Empire in favor of a more cosmopolitan and hybrid Indian-Persian Turkic culture. All right, Muslims and Christians in the Ottoman Empire. So the Ottoman Empire was the Islamic world's most important empire in the early modern period. The Ottoman state transformed into a prosperous, powerful, and cosmopolitan state and really transformed Turkish social life. Turkish women lost some of their freedoms and status, however. Now, there's a long conflict between the Sunni Ottomans and Shia Safavids that was from approximately 1534 to 1639. The Ottoman Empire was the site of a significant cross-cultural encounter. In Anatolia, most of the conquered Christians converted to Islam, but in the Balkans, the Christian subjects mostly remained Christian. Now, in the Balkans, many Christians welcomed Ottoman conquest. Ottomans taxed less and were less oppressive. The Christian churches received considerable autonomy. Women had greater property rights in Muslim courts, and the Balkan elites were accepted among the Ottoman elite without conversion. So let's take a look at the map of the Ottoman Empire. At its high point in the mid-16th century, the Ottoman Empire encompassed a vast diversity of peoples. It straddled Europe, Africa, and Asia, and battled both the Austrian and Safavid empires. So what geographical features and political realities were barriers to the further expansion of the Ottoman Empire? This map demonstrates that by 1566, the Ottoman Empire was hemmed in by mountain ranges such as the Caucasus and the Eastern Alps, deserts such as the Sahara, Syrian, and Arabian Desert, and powerful neighboring states such as the Russian and Holy Roman Empires. So let's compare this map with that of the Russian Empire from the previous section. What happened to the Ottoman Empire's tributary states north of the Black Sea after 1689? Where were the likely points of tension or conflict between the Ottoman and Russian empires during the early modern period? Well, those tributary states became part of the Russian Empire after 1689. The territory around the Black Sea would thus become a point of tension for the two empires, extending well into the 20th century. All right, the Ottoman siege of Vienna, 1683. In this late 17th century painting by Flemish artist Franz Geffels, the last Ottoman incursion into the Austrian Empire is pushed back with French and Polish help, marking the end of a serious Muslim threat to Christian Europe. So what in this painting suggests the significance of the siege of Vienna for European Christendom? Well, the perspective of this painting tells us that Vienna served as the last gateway, barring the surge of Islam from entering Christian Europe, so the victory of the massive European armies depicted at the left were crucial in saving Christendom. All right, Muslims and Christians in the Ottoman Empire continued. Now, the Jewish refugees from Spain had more opportunities in the Ottoman Empire. However, devshirme was a tribute of boys paid to by Christian Balkan communities, and that didn't always go over well. The boys were converted to Islam and trained to serve the state, and the devshirme, however, was a means of upward social mobility. Now, the Ottoman state threatened Christendom, and some Europeans admired Ottoman rule. Philosopher Jean Bodin from the 16th century praised Ottoman religious tolerance, and European merchants evaded papal bans on selling firearms to the Turks. Now, what can this image tell us about the size and form of Ottoman imperial ceremonies? What types of people are missing from the image, and what can their absence tell us about Ottoman imperial life? This image demonstrates that Ottoman imperial ceremonies were large but well planned and organized. Missing from the image are women, which tells us that women's roles did not intersect with affairs of the state. So how might ceremonies like the one depicted here help to strengthen the sultan's rule over his empire? Well, orderly and well-planned spectacles serve to strengthen imperial authority, regardless of the empire in question. This specific one depicts a vision of order and authority as the people involved and them have to follow a certain prescribed course of action to participate. All right, Louis XIV in costume, 1653. So what does France's King Louis's costume reveal about his perception of himself and his place in French society? Well, the sun is the center of the universe, as many at this time recognize, and the king as the sun then was the center of the state. To what extent did absolutism represent a change within European state systems of the time period? Well, previously, kings had to share power informally with nobles and knights in a decentralized feudal system. Absolutism consolidated power around the king. So let's analyze the role of King Louis XIV within the French state. Louis XIV demonstrates his own sense of self-importance and his effective use of spectacle to assert authority over his subjects. And our last one, the Hall of Prayer for Good Harvest, circa 1420. Which symbolic features can you identify in this image? Well, the Hall of Prayer and Good Harvest at the center of this image is circular in a square enclosure, symbolizing the intersection of heaven and earth. The stairway with the path for the emperor, the gods, and the court officials is also evident. And the stairway symbolizes the progression from heaven to earth. What does this ceremonial space have in common with that of the Felicity Gate in Topkapi Palace, which is from another source in chapter 13? What differentiates the two? Well, like the Felicity Gate, it is enclosed yet opened once inside and is also ordered with the most important structure at the center. So let's analyze the ways in which the architecture of the Hall of Prayer reinforced the spiritual role of the emperor. The spiritual role of the emperor was as an intermediary between heaven and earth, and this architecture reinforces that, with the circular heaven meeting the squared earth at the stairway. And one part of it is reserved for the emperor, linking the two. And that concludes our study of Asian empires and the political transformations from chapter 13. I will see you guys next time.